I've just wrapped up taping an interview with Haviv Gur from Israel, which I'll be playing in the next segment. But I opened today's program with Senator Dave McCormick of Pennsylvania. Welcome back, Senator. Good to have you on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Hey, how you doing, Hugh?
I am good, but I am concerned about this war. You are a warrior, a veteran of the 82nd Airborne, West Point. Tell me what you assess of this operation, codenamed by the IDF as Operation Red Wedding, in a reference to that infamous scene in the Game of Thrones.
I was just in the Middle East 2 weeks ago, and I met with Prime Minister Netanyahu. I met with the opposition leader Lapid. I had lunch with the President Herzog, and then I went to the UAE and I met with Sheikh Mohammed, the leader of the UAE. Nobody thinks that it is plausible or acceptable that Iran would have a nuclear weapon. That has to be the starting point for any conversation. President Trump has said that needs to be complete nuclear dismantlement, no enrichment. And so that's our starting point. And why is that? Well, because number one, you can't have a country have a nuclear weapon whose explicit strategy is to destroy Israel and to destroy the great Satan, which is what they say their goal is. And second, should Iran get a nuclear weapon, it would kick off an arms race in the Middle East and a proliferation of nuclear weapons, which would be very, very much against America's interests. So this is an America first priority. You protect America's interests by making sure Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. I think if you'd have looked at October 7th, if we'd have had this conversation and said, where would we be now in June of 2025, we would have never imagined that Israel would have been able to decapitate the terrorist proxies of Hezbollah, of Hamas, that the Syrian regime would have fallen, that Iran would have launched the missile attacks on Israel, and Israel counterattacked and essentially decimated the missile capability and the missile defense in Iran. Iran is at an all-time point of weakness. So A, they can't have a nuclear weapon. B, they're at a point of all-time weakness, and they face a choice. This could end tomorrow if they said, we are going to dismantle our nuclear weapons, open up to the IAEA and other observers, and try to become a peaceful participant in the region. But if they cling on to the notion that they're going to maintain a nuclear capability, we have to take it out now. It's a once-in-a-generation opportunity, and we should stand with Israel and support them in doing so.
Now, Senator McCormick, when you hear from Pennsylvanians, do they support America getting involved directly with an attack, say, on Fordo?
Well, listen, I think, Pennsylvanians and Americans are tired of 20 years of war. They're tired of sending their sons and daughters into Iraq and Afghanistan. And I'm very sympathetic to that. That's the thing I heard. And by the way, it's mostly not the kids of people here in D.C. It's in small towns like Bloomsburg and Scranton, where I grew up. Those are the ones that have borne the burdens of war. So I think we're a very reluctant warrior, a very reluctant nation to get actively involved militarily. My belief is that it's in our interest to ensure Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. It really risks our children, our sons and daughters, if they have one. So I would stand with Israel. I would give them all the air support I needed. I would be reluctant to put American troops in harm's way. I think very selective use of the bunker buster and aerial refueling, if that's needed, I would support. I would trust the president's judgment on that. But it's a very selective, very targeted, with the sole objective of eliminating that nuclear capability. We have learned the hard way. Regime change should not be an American objective. If the people rise up and decide that they want to be governed by a different kind of government, this is the time to do so. We should support that, but we shouldn't seek it as an objective, and we shouldn't play an active role in trying to facilitate it.
Senator, have you had a chance to talk to President Trump about this yet?
I was just in the Oval Office an hour or two ago for a swearing in of one of the ambassadors, Charlie Kushner, and he spoke on it briefly. So I haven't had a one-on-one conversation with him, but I think, I honestly think, Hugh, he's really managed this well, in the sense that he has stood with Israel unequivocally. He's given Israel the support it needs post October 7th. He's let them do the difficult work of taking out these terrorist proxies. But I also think he genuinely was seeking peace. Steve Witkoff was in the Oval when I was just there. genuinely seeking a peaceful resolution and giving Iran every opportunity to step off this path of destruction. And they simply didn't have the wisdom or the will to do that. And I think he's given them another off-ramp. And so I don't know what he's going to do. He obviously is playing his cards quite close to the vest, which I think is also smart. I would be delighted if Iran said we're ready, but I'm skeptical they will. And I unfortunately think that we're going to need to leave this period knowing that their chances and likelihood of a nuclear weapon has been dramatically reduced.
So, Senator, I listen to Dan Senor's podcast every day whenever it comes out, and he had on Kareem Sajupour today from the Carnegie Endowment, who I think is probably the equal of any Iran expert that the United States has at its availability. He said there's 0% chance that the Ayatollah Khamenei gives up his nuclear weapon. Their sunk costs are so immense, $500 billion of sunk costs to both proxies and into the nuclear weapons, untold opportunity costs. So let's assume that he's correct and they won't take any opportunity because they haven't. If the president asked Dave McCormick, Dave, should I send the B-2s, what would your advice be?
I think under a circumstance where it became clear that they were just simply ruling out any possibility of dismantlement, and it looked like they were going to dig in on maintaining the capability, and assuming the capability is what we're all told it is, and I believe it is based on what I know, I'd authorize that. I'd encourage the president to take that step. I think it'll be a step that if he does take, he'll take reluctantly. He'll want to exercise every other possibility. But in the end, I think if you imagine a scenario where we didn't take that step and Iran reconstitutes itself over the next couple of years and reconstitute those terrorist proxies, we would look back on this moment and say we had a unique moment of opportunity to really bring stability and security to the Middle East, on a generational opportunity, and we didn't take it. So I think obviously these are always tough choices, but I think that's the direction I would encourage him to go.
I think it's the biggest decision of his very, very decision-filled life, and I hope he makes the right one. Let me switch to two other subjects, Senator. The nomination for Mike Waltz to become the UN ambassador went up last week. It's in front of your committee. Are you guys going to move that to the top of the pile? We really need an ambassador at the UN in these days.
I just saw Mike the other day. I'm not sure whether it will make it to the top, but I'm certainly would be pushing for it to be at the top. And I know Chairman Risch, my good friend, thinks highly of Mike and thinks we need an ambassador there too. So I'm hoping we can bring it to the front of the pile. And I agree with you. We need a strong voice at the UN. The UN, without a strong pushback, will inevitably go down paths that make no sense. And listen, we've seen in the case of what's happened in Gaza and Iran and everything else that the UN, left to its own devices, is going to adopt a posture that very much cuts against American interests. So we need a strong voice to counterbalance that. And I think Mike will be a fine ambassador.
No, I don't think you're on finance, but I want to ask you about the big, beautiful bill. The bill that Senator Crapo put out, I like a lot. I don't like a lot. I like the 23% pass-through cut. I don't like it going down to 20%, et cetera, et cetera. All I really want, though, is to make sure I don't get a massive tax hike that America does. Will it get out of the Senate quickly?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, the July 4th deadline, I'm the new guy. I'm the rookie in town, so I'm not sure I'm going to put my stake on a particular date, but I think we'll get a vote soon. I think it'll pass, and I think we'll move forward. Last time I was on your show, I think in February, you were asking why the Senate just didn't take the House bill, and I think what's happened is the House bill came out. I think remarkably, by the way. I think if you and I had this conversation, if we did have a version of this conversation, and imagine we'd be where we are in June, where the speaker, the majority leader, and the president were so aligned, where the House had passed the big beautiful bill, passed it on to the Senate, where the Senate is in the midst of this negotiation, which I think will make it better. I think we have our constraints, political constraints. I think it'll be better. I think it'll have some additional cost cutting. I think it'll address some of the things in the House bill that were a little bit, maybe a little bit off, but still passable. And I don't think failure is an option for the very reason you say, Hugh. Are you kidding me? So a family in Pennsylvania if we don't pass the big beautiful bill, a family in Pennsylvania that makes $50,000 a year, by the way, the median income's $52,000, $50,000 a year, their taxes go up by $2,000. So that's not an option. And the pro-business piece of this, which is the accelerated depreciation, all of that. If you're a business guy, you want to put money out. This is growth oriented. It's great for Pennsylvania, great for our country.
Dave McCormick, Senator from Pennsylvania, always good to see you. Thank you for joining me today. I hope the next time that we meet, the war is over and the bill is passed, and we can talk about that. Thank you for being there. One of my go-to voices throughout this conflict that Israel has found itself in since 10/7/2024 is Aviv Rettig-Gur, senior analyst for the Times of Israel. He's back. Aviv, thank you. I appreciate very much the Ask Aviv Anything podcast. I've been doing this for a long time, so I can recognize voices, and I can also hear exhaustion and stress. And I hear a lot of exhaustion and stress in Ask Aviv Anything. How are you doing?
We're good. We're good. Could be worse. Our family's doing fairly well. Occasionally there are these, missile strikes, rocket strikes. The skies are closed. The planes aren't flying. So I was supposed to go on a speaking tour tomorrow. Luckily, I'm home. So, I say luckily, I mean that in all these complicated ways. But so everybody's lives are a little bit paused, and we're hoping for the best. And we have some heroes flying over the skies of a distant country that wants to kill us and taking care of business.
Have you persuaded your 14-year-old son to get a move on and get to the shelter when the sirens go off, or is he still being a teenager?
Yes, I'm very proud of him for being completely wrong on this issue. Just people don't maybe know what I mentioned on the podcast, that he feels that the enemy wants us running scared, and so he doesn't want to run scared. And so when the rocket siren rings or the missile siren sounds, he at the beginning didn't want to go into the bomb shelters because in principle, and I really admire that. And young men are brave, sometimes foolishly so. But what I told him was people are risking their lives right now to make sure he's safe. So what he owes them is to make sure he's safe. So he has been very disciplined, and he himself also understood that he has 3 younger siblings, and they are following his example. So for them, he goes in. Yeah.
So Aviv, that got me thinking. What does let's just use son as a metaphor for every youngster in Israel who's old enough to try. Well, who does he think Iran is, and why do they hate the Jews in Israel so much?
He has a phone. He's 14, so he's the only kid I have with his own phone, and sees TikTok and YouTube and things like that. And he comes to me constantly and to his mother with questions, and that's one of the big questions. Why do they hate us so much? And when and what he hears on social media sometimes is that it's about the Gaza war, or it's about Palestinians, or it's about and it's not, and he knows it's not, and he is both on English language social media and on Hebrew language social media because he's basically bilingual, and he understands that it is extremely possible and even I would say important to really care and empathize with the situation of the Palestinians, but the Iranian regime has driven the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people and does not care about actual suffering of actual civilians in any conflict anywhere. This is about this radical ideology that animates and drives that regime and has turned it into the tyranny that it is. And we've had those conversations. And the truth is, like a lot of people, 14 is very young, but it's also surprisingly old. Like a lot of people, he wants to actually understand. In other words, nobody thinks they're evil. So what would turn someone into the kinds of evil that you're seeing in Iran, in the Iranian regime? And we've had those conversations about the history of that regime, the ideology of that regime, why it makes sense to them, and why they are a blight on their own people and are going to fall.
Yeah, I think that I was 13, not 14, when I read One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. My older brother brought it home from college. I read it, in a couple hours, not a very long book. Bingo, anti-communist. And it went from there. But I think that was a lot easier to understand. A gulag, the Stalin's era, I think that was just easier to understand than a 36-year serving dictator theocrat with an end times theology, which is, if not pressing for cataclysm, indifferent to it. Did he get that part of it? I'm really curious what the next generation of Israelis are going to be like after this.
Yes, it's all present. It's never not there. They know Hamas. They know the Ayatollahs. They know Hezbollah. These are organizations constantly telling Israelis, often in Hebrew. Today, Khamenei tweeted in Hebrew, often telling Israelis that they're coming for them and they're going to kill them and they're going to destroy them and learn how to swim and all the kinds of things like that. And they know also that there are 2 billion Muslims in the world, and whatever it is, 2.5, 3 billion Christians. I don't know the numbers, and very few Jews. And the only Jews around are somehow, the focus of a tremendous amount of emotional investment, unhealthy and unreasonable emotional investment by all kinds of different people and movements and groups. He himself said, what a stupid thing it is that Iran spends so much time on Israel, because it's far away, and Israel doesn't spend a minute thinking about Iran. The only part of Iran Israelis ever think about is that nuclear program and the ballistic missiles meant to deliver the nuke to Israel, because it's the only thing that matters to. It's just a country somewhere else that we have no border with, no interest in, and no reason to deal with. And for Iran to have, Woody Allen once said about anti-Semitism, it's hating Jews more than is strictly necessary. It's not,
Yes.
Jews are. I live with Jews. Jews are, difficult, but then you suddenly obsess about them. That's already anti-Semitism. So these are regimes and peoples around us. There are these poles of anti-Semitism in places like Algeria, where 90% think the Jews control the world through the banking systems and things like that. These are the questions asked by pollsters over the decades. And so we live around societies who explain their own failures, and their leaders are the cause of those failures and want to promote other reasons, other explanations, and they use us. And he knows that, and he sees it every day, and he hears it from them. And there's tremendous unity among Israelis. We're very divided religiously and ethnically and culturally and all these different ways. And then our enemies show up, and suddenly it unites us because it's all so clear and obvious, and our enemies are so, in that sense, pathetic. They're so profoundly pathetic. Israel doesn't blame its problems on others, and countries that do tend to be failures.
Can he distinguish? My last question about a 14-year-old, but I do think Ask Habib Anything is a wonderful podcast. I recommend it to everyone because it's very. Let me pause here and come back later and start at that moment. Got to take my relief factor, which is right here. I got to remind you to call 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief. I take it every day. I'll tell you why in a second, because in the new studio, I have a chair that I hate, and the chair that I hate won't last. I went down to Staples today and said, I've got to have a better back support. So it's really racking my back. The good news is I take a relief factor every day, and I wake up every morning, I'm fine. But then I sit in this chair for 3 hours, and I feel, this is terrible. Then I take my relief factor. You should too. 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, or go to their website and find their starter pack offer, $19.95, and then just go to relieffactor.com and type on or hit that opening starter pack. Try it for 3 weeks and see if you don't agree with me that that's the best pain relief from minor aches and pains you've ever had. I've been using it for 10 years. Relieffactor.com. Before the program began today, I spoke for half an hour with Haviv Rehigur. He is the senior analyst for Times of Israel. Let's pick up the interview where I left it off at the break. Can he distinguish? My last question about a 14-year-old, but I do think Ask Habib Anything is a wonderful podcast. I recommend it to everyone because it's very personal. And I do think a 14-year-old is a good person to ask this. Does he understand that the Persian people are different from the regime?
He didn't automatically, and neither did my 11-year-old, who My older son is this phenomenal juggler and athlete, and he's in a track team and things like that. And my second son is very much a bookworm who sits down and reads and thinks and constantly lectures us about the things he's learning. I don't know where he got that from. And both of them come and talk about, talk about Iranians. Initially, they talk about Palestinians in ways that they're enemies. They see them as enemies. They think of them as enemies. And then we have these conversations in which I tell them, I served with Palestinians in the army, in the Israeli army. I work with Palestinians. I mean, that they're more than the conflict. They're entire people. They're kids over there asking questions about us. I mean, there's a whole world of in that other culture that we don't see, we don't understand. You don't speak their language, right? So it isn't just those ideological elites or ideologues who want to burn the world to the ground in the name of some great redemption story. The Iranian people hate their regime. That's an easy thing to tell my son because I could prove it in 5 seconds. The polls are all out there, and if we can weaken that regime to the point where the Iranians can reclaim their freedom and their future, they will be grateful. And so after our conversations, yes, he knows it. If all he goes by is what he sees on the news and what he sees on the internet, that creates a lot of distance and a lot of hatred, a lot of fear and anger. But we talk about it.
Yeah, my guess, and it's a guess, I haven't polled this, I haven't seen any polling on this, just person-to-person conversation. There's a vast Iranian American population in Southern California where I lived for 30 years. I mean, a vast population. And first, American Jews are going to be supporting Israel. Zionist, pro-Zionist non-Jews are supporting Israel. And then I'll bet the happiest group in the world are the Persian diaspora, including those in America, who want this regime weakened and eventually replaced. I'm certain of that. Do you believe that?
Oh, I know it. I know it for sure. A lot of the Iranian diaspora in America is Jewish or Baha'i or people who simply could not survive under the regime, who could not live normal lives. A lot of elites, a lot of the smartest and wealthiest, and not wealthy, but most productive. In other words, just generations of Iranian mathematicians and scientists and extremely useful people to any country have been basically scooped up by the West, including by the United States, including by Silicon Valley. And so America has a lot of Iranians, Persians, a lot of Iranian cultures and minorities, and also some of the Iranians that Iran really could use if it wasn't such a mismanaged, oppressive regime. Absolutely.
So Haviv, pause right there. I'll come back. All of the Haviv Rettig Gur interviews already posted at YouTube. Harley has done a magnificent job. For those of you who just want to listen to it straight through, I'll play the rest in the course of the program. I do want to tell you that the American Legislative Exchange Council is a great sponsor of our show, alec.org/Hugh, if you'd like to get their newsletter. They put out one of their 50 lists again today. It is the landmark state labor policy rating that assess how the 50 states treat the right to work. The right to work protections, occupational licensing reform, laws that defend Janus rights, promote transparency in public sector bargaining. There are a lot of different things that go into having a good labor market. The top 5 states: Arizona number 1, thank you Doug Ducey. Utah number 2, consistently in the top 5 of everything. Georgia is number 3. Arkansas is number 4, and Florida is number 5. The bottom 5, Alaska is 50th, Massachusetts, Oregon, New York, and Connecticut in reverse order. To get that, go to alec.org/Hugh or go to richstatespoorstates.com and get your free book. ALEC is a wonderful organization. If you are a state legislator of either or any party, you ought to join ALEC and you ought to learn about it and subscribe to the weekly State of the States newsletter at alec.org/Hugh. Mary Catherine Ham is host of Getting Hammered podcast, which is taking its summer break, and I'm glad that it is. Mary Catherine, before I ask you about the massive ordnance penetrator and whether or not Donald Trump ought to drop it, I have a setup for you. Right now, Prison Fellowship Angel Tree is raising money through a campaign to raise $200 scholarships one by one for kids. And we've done that for 300 kids this year. We're proud of that. The banner's at hughhewitt.com. But I got to thinking, did Mary Catherine Ham go to camp as a kid?
No, I did not. I wish I had. I let my kids go because I didn't. No, my mom was a teacher, so she was home during the summer, but not really home because she was actually like a very dedicated teacher who was working in her elementary school library during the summer. So we went to the library and read books and did piecemeal Mylar covers for books for her and got paid like 10 cents a piece.
Well, that's a fine way to spend the summer. I'm all for that. Do you regret, you take your kids camping, do you regret not having had a summer camping experience?
I had one overnight camping experience, and it was like legit camping, not a idyllic like on a lake with cabins situation. It was just like there was a latrine involved. And I have to say that 1 week that I spent at overnight camp with my peers was one of the best weeks of my childhood. So I understand why people do it. It's amazing. My kids have magical experiences. It just wasn't in the cards for our family as much, but I loved that week.
I only did it twice, and that was enough. But I hope everyone out there goes to hughhewitt.com and contributes to Angel Tree. Mary Catherine, if the president were to call you up, and he might, and say, what do you think, Mary Catherine Ham? Should I drop the massive ordnance penetrator, 30,000 pounds of it, on Fordo? What would you say?
I mean, this seems like a relatively, I don't want to be naive about the consequences, but it does seem like a relatively bargain way to take down a massively dangerous regime to its knees, basically, given the incredible intel that Israel has acted upon, the ways that its intel and military force have been able to take out seemingly all defenses for Iranian important sites at this point. And I think I'd be in the yes camp.
I'm in the very definitely yes camp. I also think it's the most important decision Donald Trump will ever make. I don't have any idea what he's going to do, but I hope he does make up his mind rather soon. How do you put your scale of astonishment on a 0 being that happens every day and 10 I never thought I'd see it? Where are you?
Okay. Oh, on whether this will happen or whether we're
what has happened?
I'd put it around like a 7, like on the never thought I'd see it side. I think that especially over the last 10 years, it's become a rare treat to watch an institution do what it's supposed to do extremely competently. And obviously October 7th was a failure for Israeli intelligence and military. And since that time, we have seen such incredible victories by them, such incredibly competent, almost magical things they have accomplished. I did not think we would be here. It's been exhilarating to watch them defend themselves in such a competent manner.
Exhilarating is a good word. I want to close this way, Mary Catherine. Our friend Bethany Mandel was on yesterday. She's talking to her friends in Israel, have 4 children, like my daughter, like you. They get up 3 times a night and go to the bomb shelter, then they go back up to their beds and they go back down. And they've been doing it for a week, and there are missiles in the air. I can't imagine what a mother and a family, how cranky do you think your kids would be? They would be alive, but how difficult would that be?
So very difficult. And the thing about the Israelis is that they're so incredibly resilient. And I have been since October 7th to Israel. And, you know, it's been dangerous the whole time. There are several fronts of war going on. There are people whose fathers and brothers-in-law are off fighting at different times in different places, very close to home, all of this. And yet there are people playing volleyball on the beach in Tel Aviv and having the time of their lives. It is truly an amazing society. And this is the other thing, is when you think about what those mothers are going through and you think, well, could we take one big strike and eliminate the possibility that this continues to happen to them or gets worse in the future? That feels like peace to me. I understand that peace through strength is not what many of our friends on the left are into, but it's an old saw for a reason. When you when you take something out at its root, you solve that problem for the foreseeable future, and you create a situation where you could have more peace, not just for Israelis, but more freedom for Iranians, or at least self-determination once we're out of there and they have like some sort of ability to step up as they have in the past and in flashes here and there.
Okay, last bonus question. I have dismissed the argument from the, let's call him the restrainer, right? As loud but not large. I think there's overwhelming support for supporting Israel. Do you agree with me?
I think there is overwhelming support for supporting Israel. I think what people are concerned about, I think it was Lee Wolf of the Ruthless podcast who said, you're not anti-war, you're anti-nation building. And it's fair for people to be concerned about that. It's fair for them to be war weary, particularly people in the military community have been through so much over the last 25 years. I understand that. I think Trump has a really good record of being occasionally bellicose, getting a problem solved, and then not doing it anymore. He has not gotten into quagmires. That has been his way. I think that's basically his doctrine, occasional bellicosity doctrine with Trump. And so I'm not as worried about him as I have been in the past.
Very well said, and I'm going to steal that, but with a credit, Mary Catherine Ham. Follow her on Twitter at MKHammer, and we await the return of Getting Hammered soon, I hope. Thank you, Mary Catherine. I want to tell you, I know some of you have been waiting to buy a house, and interest rates aren't budging. That doesn't mean you shouldn't get moving. AndrewandTodd.com, 888-888-1172. They are bankers. They lend you money. They were Sierra Pacific Mortgage. AndrewandTodd.com want you to be ready, want you to be prepared. The perfect house might arrive. And then you should go and get the perfect house. And you should take whatever the interest rate is, because they're going to come down. Jay Powell said today, not yet, but maybe soon. That's a condensed version. We're not going to lower rates right now, but we will soon. Once they start to come down and inflation doesn't go up, they're going to come down, come down, come down. If you get the house now, your perfect house now, you can refinance. AndrewandTodd.com, make it so easy. So please give them a call at 888-888-1172. Don't let the perfect house get away. Get the perfect house and refinance when you have to. AndrewandTodd.com. You can fill out a couple of questions and get the process started. But get pre-qualified, get the loan done, be ready to walk in with an offer in hand. Call them, 888-888-1172. We have a brand new affiliate this week on the radio side. We're both on the Salem News Channel and in people's cars and homes around the country on radio. And down at Port St. Lucie on the Atlantic coast in Florida. Right. I got it right.
You got it right.
Port St. Lucie.
Yes.
1590 WPSL, the talk of the Treasure Coast. They do not know yet. This is Dwayne, if you're watching on Salem News Channel. Dwayne has been my producer for 25 years, come July 10, which I remember because that's my wedding anniversary as well.
Right.
And there used to be a lot more of Dwayne. So if you're watching on the Salem News Channel or you're listening, Dwayne used to sound twice as big. His voice used to be twice as big because he went on myphdweightloss.com and lost 50 pounds. And what do you know? They wanted to sponsor the show then. So they become an advertiser. 864-644-1900. That's
864-644-1900.
It does not involve shots or pills. What's it involve, Dwayne?
Just honest nutrition and talking to a counselor and accountability more than anything else. Determination and accountability and methodically losing the weight and then learning how to keep it off.
You lost 50 pounds in 3 months and have kept it off for 2 years.
Yes. A little over.
myphdweightloss.com or call
864-644-1900.
Now, you do 2 podcasts a week as well, Dwayne. Dwayne's World. And I just played the intro music for that. Did your podcast get eclipsed by events since you taped it yesterday?
No, it didn't. I talked to Jim Talent, our good friend, former senator from Missouri, and we spent almost a whole hour talking about what's going on in Iran. And we both think that, Fordo is not long for this world. And we were kind of thinking that by the time the podcast dropped, Fordo the elevation would have, lowered a little bit in that mountain. But so far, it hasn't happened yet. But it's coming. It has to come.
I think it's coming, but not until the Nimitz is within striking distance of Iran.
We talked about that, too, because the Iranians are threatening to seal off the Strait of Hormuz again. And I read that story, and that was the Jeopardy answer to the question: why is the Nimitz on the way?
Yeah. And by the way, if they do strike anything, I have a whaler with friends up in Maine. They're going to sink even the whalers on the coast
Yes.
of Iran. It's a
Yes.
little 12-foot boat.
They will even splash the dinghies.
Yeah, they're going to take the whalers down.
Yes.
So don't do it, Iran. Don't be stupid. Don't be stupid at all. All right, 864
644.
1900. That's my PhDweightloss.com. But don't go anywhere because Best Hot Grill is also your sponsor, as it is my sponsor. Solar infrared grills can be bought at besthotgrill.com.
As it should.
Our Port St. Lucie people, what do they need to know about the besthotgrill.com?
It gets hotter than an Iranian oil field. I mean, it gets hot really quick, seals in the moisture, seals in the juices, nowhere near the toxicity, and it will make a steak that you have never had before in your life.
They're made in America. I don't know if Rhett's going to use that slogan, but I like it. It gets hotter than an Iranian oil field. It's besthotgrill.com. Get it for Dad if you forgot Father's Day. Get it for the grads who are out there. Besthotgrill.com. Try it before you buy it at besthotgrill.com.
The destruction or the dismantling of the Fordow nuclear enrichment center, is that a prerequisite for a deal? Is that a red line for you?
No, it's just something that people talk about having. We're the only ones that have the capability to do it, but that doesn't mean I'm going to do it at all. Yeah, we have the best military equipment in the world. You see that with this fight. We have planes that are undetectable, flying around like, nobody's able to see them stealth. You guys want to be stealthy tonight. You can be stealth, you'll never lose, right? But these are incredible planes and weapons. We have the best weapons in the world, by far. Nobody close. And certain countries take advantage of that. Israel has incredible weaponry. So we'll see what happens. I've been asked about it by everybody, but I haven't made a decision.
Morning, glory, and grace, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That was Donald Trump in the last hour saying he has not made a decision on whether to strike Fordow and other sites in Iran. I'm joined now by John Podhoretz, editor of Commentary Magazine and host of the great Commentary podcast. John, what's your guess?
I have no idea. I mean, let's put it this way. I don't think that Israel would have gone into this process without an endgame that did not involve the United States, meaning that Israel has a plan to take out the Fordow nuclear site. That plan must arguably be more difficult to achieve and more difficult to implement than the simple act of B-2 bombers with, bunker busters that can do the task in a couple of sorties. So if we're talking about efficiency, the American involvement would be the most efficient, the most pinpoint, the most direct. If we're talking about whether or not Israel can achieve this on its own, I suspect that it can, or they would not have begun this process in the first place.
John, I listen to commentary every day this week, and on Monday, you alerted to me that when the president came down the escalator 10 years ago, he talked about Iran not getting a nuke. So I went back and found the transcript, and by goodness, you're right, he did it twice. He said Iran's taking over the Middle East and they can't have a nuke. So he's been consistent on this. Do you think most people know what you knew?
No, I mean, yes, in one sense, which is that to the extent that he has said anything consistent on foreign policy, it has been this. And what's more, it has been an open issue since 2015 when he came down the escalator, because the Iran nuclear deal had just been struck between Obama and Iran. And he said it was the worst deal ever and it was terrible. And John Kerry, the Secretary of State who was the head of negotiating it, was silly and a silly person who had just broken his leg riding a bicycle, and he would never ride a bicycle. And I'm only bringing this up because he sort of turned this into an occasion for a one-liner during that introductory speech as presidential candidate. But it just indicates how memorable a moment that was, that this was the main thing he said on foreign policy. He
Yeah,
said, "This is a
I
terrible
could
deal.
not
Iran
believe
can't
it.
get a deal."
I had forgotten
I mean,
that.
it's literally the
Now,
only thing. Unless you look at immigration as a foreign policy issue, which it is obviously to some extent, this was the thing he said, and he said we have to protect Israel. He said that also in 2015. So it's 10 years later. He said it then. He's saying it now. The idea that he would come in on Israel's side is therefore something that seems obvious in retrospect. But since he had decided to go into this negotiation with Iran in April, or yeah, I guess in April, around April 11th, 12th, he said, I want to negotiate with them. I want to see what we can do there. I'm going to give it 60 days. And then on day 61, Netanyahu moved. And I doubt
I
that
really
he would have
want
moved.
people.
Yeah.
I really want people to listen to yesterday's commentary podcast, because you talk about God, and you're not like I am. I'm kind of upfront evangelical Roman Catholic Presbyterian. I talk about God all the time. I believe there's an order and a plan, but you I don't associate you with that. You're more Jeffersonian, Lincoln, deist, but not real. I don't really know what you believe, but
I'm not a deist.
There's
I'm not a deist. I'm a believing Jew, and I'm an observant Jew. So in that sense, yes. But I believe that one cannot look at the survival of the Jewish people or the continued existence of the state of Israel, particularly in the wake of the worst catastrophe the Jewish people ever faced, and say that there isn't something providential going on. The survival of the Jewish people over 2 millennia after they were scattered to the 4 winds by Rome expelling them from the Holy Land, and nonetheless surviving and remaining on this earth when every tribe of the Middle East of that day has long since vanished into the sands of history, and then returning to the Holy Land and facing down this enemy, developing this astounding army. We're talking about a people, the Jewish people, who had no tradition of military or fighting authority whatsoever, didn't have a country to defend, were generally not drafted into, did not fight for the armed forces of the nations in which they were sort of like an alien tribe. And then they turn around and become this extraordinary, disciplined, powerful, innovative fighting force. Something's going on here that is,
Walker Percy, the great
novelist. You could call it supernatural. You could call it, you can call it whatever you want to call it. But as I look at this, and I looked at the results of the first 4 days of this campaign against Iran, you have to say, somebody up there likes me.
That I agree, John. Walker Percy wrote a great little piece once on why he believed in God. He said, and someone can explain the Jews to me, I'll stop believing in God. And I've always used that line with people because it's completely dispositive of the argument. Yeah, it's providential. Now let's get very specific. Joe Trusman just posted minutes ago, the IDF announced it carried out large-scale strike in Tehran, targeting over 20 military sites linked to Iran's nuclear weapons development and missile production programs. Guided by the IDF intelligence directorate, 60 Israeli Air Force jets struck weapon production facilities, centrifuge manufacturing sites, R&D centers supporting Iran's uranium enrichment efforts, activities far exceeding civilian energy needs. They also hit factories producing missile components, air defense systems which support attacks on Israel. Earlier in the day, they hit the Besiege. I am astonished at their intelligence, John.
I think everybody should be astonished by their intelligence, and this goes to show again that not a supernatural element, that in 2005, when Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, then the president of Iran, said Israel's not going to exist for very much longer, following along his predecessor, the Ayatollah Rafsanjani, who said we're going to wipe Israel off the map. Israel, then not governed by Bibi Netanyahu, put into motion a generation-long effort to penetrate Iran, to be present, to retard, to slow down the Iranian nuclear ambitions, and now, as we see, finally to take them out. So what did we see over the course of the last 15, 20 years? The Stuxnet worm, which destroyed Iran's computer mainframe system. The seizure, the astounding seizure of the entire history of the Iranian nuclear program from essentially a giant filing cabinet in the desert, which they got their hands on and drove from Iran into Israel. And by the way, that discovery of that entire record had two consequences, one of which was it was the reason finally that Trump pulled out of the JCPOA. Because Israel said, here are these papers. It shows that they absolutely do not mean to do anything to retard their program. And secondly, all of the targets that we're talking about, Israel found out about in that paperwork. So they got this paper and it gave them a roadmap on what to hit today. And that was 7 years ago. I mean, the patience is astonishing.
Strategic patience. I asked Habib Reddy Gur earlier today, and I've been playing it throughout the show. Does he think Mossad is at this moment planting the seeds for the next war 10 years down the road if this regime does not collapse? He said, absolutely. They've doubled in size in 4 years. We got about a minute, John. Do you agree that right now they're planning on the next war 10 years from now if they have to do it again?
I don't know what the target is, but I do know that this follows along what happened with Hezbollah, which was, as people remember, this remarkable mission where they basically opened up a beeper and walkie-talkie business and then sold equipment to Hezbollah that then 5 to 10 years later, they pushed a button and blew up the beepers. So this strategic patience is their model. It's not our model,
works.
It's their model, and it works. Obviously it works. And so, but the sacrifices that have been made by Israeli intelligence soldiers, personnel, to do these things to get to this point is also almost supernatural.
Commentary podcast. Do not miss one day of it. Joined by our regular guest, former Congressman John Campbell, former state legislator in California, former member of Congress. He's responsible for all that ails California, and I usually remind him of that. But today, John, I want to talk about two things. Your reaction to the extraordinary week that is unfolding in the Middle East, and to today's announcement by Fed Chairman Jerome Powell that, not yet. You take them in either order you want.
All right, let's take them in the order in which you gave them, which is clearly the order of importance, by the way. Watching what Israel has done has been just fascinating, unbelievable. I heard Mary Catherine Ham last hour, and she used the term almost magical. And I thought that was a great term in terms of what Israel has accomplished with their intelligence. And obviously, October 8th was a giant intelligence. October 7th was a giant intelligence failure. But boy, I don't want to say making up for it, but they're showing that the Mossad still is as capable as any intelligence organization anywhere in the world. But I think, and in my Look Through the Chaos blog, which I just put to bed, so it'll be up tomorrow, one of the things, when the president mentioned unconditional surrender, a lot of the historians and foreign policy experts that I follow point out that without unconditional surrender, wars often never really end. They simmer or they keep going on. I mean, there are people who say that World War I never really ended in 1918, that it was the armistice that was really a truce, and that the same war fired back up again 20 years later. If you look at the wars that America has fought since World War II, which was obviously unconditional surrender, but since then, I mean, Korea is still kind of going on. Vietnam was an armistice, we pulled out, and then our side lost. Same thing in Afghanistan and other places. So I think the objective here is unconditional surrender, the removal of their nuclear capabilities, and you would want regime change, but you don't want it. We've tried installing Jeffersonian democracies in countries that don't have a history of that, and it doesn't work. So the Iranian people need to cause the leadership change, and they need to put in whatever they want to replace it. And as long as they don't have nukes and they don't believe every Jew in the world should be killed, then we should be fine with it. But so I don't know what the president's going to do from here, but what Israel's done so far is absolutely astounding, and they are doing us and the world a favor by hopefully cutting off the head of a snake that has the potential to destabilize more than just the Middle East. Let's turn now, unless you want to ask about that, we'll turn to
No, that I
Powell
will
and the Federal Reserve.
look through the chaos tomorrow and get your longer version, but I want you to talk about the Fed because I'm mystified.
Yeah, well, there's no reason to be necessarily mystified. The Fed isn't as important right now as it has been in the past. It can do two things: raise and lower short-term interest rates, short-term only, long-term are determined by markets. And they can either print money or they can withdraw money from the economy. That's it. And basically today they agreed just to stand pat. They're not going to print money. They're not really withdrawing that much money from the economy right now. And to leave short-term interest rates where they were. They don't know what to do. They don't know, and nobody knows exactly what the tariffs, what effect they're going to have, where the economy is going in the future, what's going to happen. So they've decided rather than try and guess and put it up and put it down, they'll just leave it alone. But even if they had they raised interest rates or lowered interest rates, what is going on in the world right now and what is going on in the Trump administration and in what's called fiscal policy with the big, beautiful bill and all that has way more effect on the economy and interest rates and inflation and everything else than the Fed does right now. The Fed is actually a relatively unimportant player. If oil continues to go up a whole lot in price because of the war in the Middle East, that is going to be inflationary, and there's nothing the Fed can do about it, one way or the other. If the big beautiful bill passes, that's probably going to be stimulative to the economy, and the economy will grow, and unemployment will not go up, and there's not anything the Fed can do about it. And so there's a whole lot of other things going on, and then what Scott Bessent is doing with issuance of Treasury bills and how he's managing the whole debt situation in the Treasury is also important. So, yeah, the Fed made an announcement today. They basically said nothing, but they're just not the top dog right now, which in my view is a good thing.
Well, here's my question. For the first time in probably a year, the Wall Street Journal ran a story that it's a buyer's market in real estate. There are 500,000 more homes on the market than there are buyers looking to buy homes. And that's because interest rates are too high for buyers. The only thing I can see the Fed doing is juicing the home building that we need to have. It's the engine that drives our economy. It used to be cars, now it's home building. Don't they need to pay attention to that?
Okay, I have argued that cars and houses determine the economy. If they go down, the economy goes down. If they're doing well, the economy stays up. So I agree with you on that. And housing is more important than cars. It's just a bigger part of the economy. But the reason, and yes, the housing market is in trouble. Interest rates are only part of that equation. The other equation is the price of houses, and that they have gone up so dramatically in the last few years. What keeps people from buying houses is the payment. And the payment, and whether their income, they can afford the payment. And the payment is a function of the price of the house and the interest rate. Hugh, you can lower interest rates from, they're almost 7% on a 30-year fixed mortgage now, to 4% tomorrow. And yes, it would help, but the prices are still going to have to come down. The price of housing right now is just too high for your average person to be able to afford it. And yes, you're right. When housing prices come down, the problem with that is that's a huge wealth effect on people. Hey, my house is worth $700,000. It used to be worth only $400,000. I'm $300,000 richer. So I'm going to go out and buy a car and have a steak dinner and take a vacation. That is the way people think. And if that $700,000 house goes back down to $500,000, even though they may not be selling it or anything like that, it still creates a psychological effect with people that says, oh, I may not need, maybe we don't do that vacation. Maybe we don't go out to dinner as much as we were because our house isn't worth $700,000 anymore. But if it doesn't come down, I don't know how people afford this stuff. It's this. If you look at all the statistics where you take the price of the house and the interest rates, this is the most against people's average income. against the average income. This is the most unaffordable housing has been since World War II, which is when they've been tracking records.
Which is why I hope the Fed moves next quarter. John Campbell, we will be reading Look Through the Chaos coming up tomorrow when it issues. In the meantime, I want you to follow John over on X. I just want to make sure I get it right because he finally changed it to JBT Campbell, at JBT Campbell. Thank you, John Campbell. Don't forget, we are in the last sprint to raise money for children who need to go to camp this summer. Our sponsor, Prison Fellowship, has the Angel Tree camps all across the United States. Please consider a $200 donation. You may have been thinking about it all these weeks that I've been talking about it. My guest hosts are. The banner is at the top of HughHewitt.com, or you can simply give them a call, all right? Just call them at 888-206-2764, 888-206-2764. Change a child's summer and life who has mom and or dad in jail or prison. Send them to camp. Send them to Angel Tree. The banner is at the top of HughHewitt.com. Thank you for listening today. Whether you're in your car or listening, if you're my new affiliate down in Port St. Lucie on the Atlantic coast, listening to AM 1590, the Talk of the Treasure Coast, welcome aboard. I try and keep you up to date. President Trump had a presser in the Oval minutes ago, cut number 25, talking about Iran.
What's your message to Americans both here and abroad who are not only concerned about the U.S. potentially getting involved in another conflict in the Middle East, but worry about the potential for retaliation here at home?
Yeah, well, I don't want to get involved either, but I've been saying for 20 years, maybe longer, that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I've been saying it for a long time. And I think they were a few weeks away from having one. And they had to sign a document. I think they wish they signed it now. It was a fair deal. And now it's a harder thing to sign, you know. It's a lot of water over the dam. But, you know, it's very, I say it very simply. Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. Too much devastation. And they'd use it. You know, I believe they'd use it. Others won't use it, but I believe they'd use it. So that's it. It's very simple as far as I'm concerned. They can't have a nuclear weapon.
Now he said it again, cut 26.
Look, they should have made the deal. I had a great deal for them. They should have made that deal. 60 days we talked about it, and in the end they decided not to do it, and now they wish they did it. And they want to meet, but it's, you know, it's a little late to meet, but they want to meet, and they want to come to the White House. They'll even come to the White House. So we'll see. I may do that, but it's a shame it could have been done the easy way.
You know, I think he's a developer. He's not going to offer them the same term sheet. He's not going to give them the same terms that were on the table before. At least I hope he doesn't. He got a question that he liked, and it ended up being a shout out to my colleague Charlie on Salem. So let's give a listen to this because Charlie Kirk deserves it. Cut 28.
Border, you've had record low numbers for the month of May, 95 apprehensions, 0 releases, compared to that of the previous administration exactly a year ago, more than 60,000 releases. What do you attribute that success to?
I like you. Who are you with?
Turning Point USA, sir.
Well, they're very good. Turning Point, Charlie, very good. That's what I call a good question, fellas. 1 out of 10, John. 1 out of 10, but that's a really good question. No, we had record good numbers on the border. And people are coming in, but they have to come in legally. Like some of these guys behind me, they have to come in legally. And if they come in legally, we want them. They have to say they love America, they love our country. And if they can't say that, we don't want them. Thank you very much. Very nice. Thank you.
You know, the Turning Point, I don't know the reporter from Turning Point. It's a good question. It's a great question. And she's working for Charlie Kirk and the president. I like Charlie. Of course he does. And who doesn't like Charlie? Crazies on the left. But other than that, to my new listeners in Port St. Lucie, I do a market report every day brought to you by our sponsor, American Federal. If you buy gold, or you need to sell your gold, or you want to sell your gold because you say, my goodness, it was at $3,400 an ounce yesterday, and now it's at $3,383 an ounce. That's not very smart. But if you want to sell it, call up our friend Nick Rovich at AmericanFederal.com. Nick and his team have been buying and selling gold, and that's what they do. They buy and sell gold. The more gold you buy, and they do some 7-figure sales, and the more gold you sell, the lower the commission. the more gold you buy, the lower the commission. But if you're buying just a little bit here and a little bit there every month, every quarter, every year, that's fine too. Okay, Nick will sell that to you if you just want to add a little stash of Krugerrands or a little stash of American Eagles or a little stash of Maple Leaves, ounces or quarter. That's fine. He'll deal with you and he'll be very transparent. He'll be very honest, very upfront. Nick and his team, I would advise you to go to AmericanFederal.com because it's a wonderful website. I'm looking for the market numbers, which I wrote down somewhere. The American Federal number is 800-221-7694, 800-221-7694. The Dow today was down 0.1%. The S&P was down 0.03%. The NASDAQ was up 0.13%. And gold is at $3,383 an ounce. This is Relief Factor. I take it every day in the first hour of the show. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, I'm holding up the bag. I take it every day. I'm going to take it twice today because I'm sitting in the wrong chair. This chair is not made for a 3-hour radio television broadcast on the Salem News Channel and Salem Media Network. It's made for a 10-minute hit, and I ordered the wrong thing. My bad. But I'll get a new one, and I'll be fine. But the back is saying, hey, ouch, 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 because I don't have any back support. Relief Factor takes care of it overnight. I'm fine until I begin the show, and then it's a wreck by the end of the show. But I'll get it fixed by next week. I ordered the new chair today, and I took my Relief Factor today. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. 1-800-4-RELIEF. Or go to their website, find the starter pack, $19.95 at relieffactor.com. That's their best website. Go to it, relieffactor.com. Earlier today, right before the live program began, I talked with Haviv Rettig Gur, senior analyst for the Times of Israel from his base in Israel. Let's resume that interview, a part of which I've already played on the program today. Or not. I think it was a
second delay. I apologize.
It happens. I was just graduated from college and had gone to work for Richard Nixon in the Elba of America, San Clemente, 1978 to 1979. And we would spend a lot of time, Ray Price, myself, and the former president, watching the demonstrations. Then in January of 79, the Shah fleeing, and then in 79, February, Khomeini arriving, and then Khomeini's consolidation of the revolution and his displacement, then the hostage crisis. You weren't old enough, were you? I guess you might have been old enough. It's been a long time. Can you have any memories of this happening?
I was born in 81.
Okay, so you don't. Well, at the time, President Nixon said this is a disaster. Iran is one of the 3 pillars of the Middle East, the other 2 being Israel and Saudi Arabia, and Carter doesn't know what's happening. I don't think any American president has understood until this moment what Iran is, and I'm hoping Donald Trump does, and that he acts to destroy not just Fordo, but wherever else American air power can help. Do you think he understands it? Because he's been saying the same thing about it for 10 years, since he came down the escalator. Indeed, in the speech he gave when he came down the escalator, he said, Iran is taking over the Middle East and they must not be allowed to have a nuke, and I won't let it. John Kerry's not the guy to do this deal. Do you think he gets it?
Every sign we have is that he gets it. He was standoffish on the idea of helping Israel in a strike. What we know, I think we've talked about this in the past, but what we have heard, we Israeli journalists, from leaks from the Israeli side, from meetings between Netanyahu and Trump, is that Trump basically said to the Israelis, I don't mind flying shotgun with you on this thing. I know that with us you can accomplish a lot more, and you can maybe accomplish the decisive thing, which is Fordo, but not just Fordo. There's other pieces. But it has to be a home run. That's what Trump is reportedly, as far as I know, and this is what Israeli journalists are talking about. That's what Trump told Netanyahu. Give me a home run and I'll join. He doesn't want to get bogged down. He doesn't want American troops hurt. He doesn't want a Middle Eastern war that's unwinnable because the other side can suffer infinitely and doesn't care about damage, and he doesn't want that. So if the Israelis can do the home run, then America can join. And what we have seen essentially is Trump basically following up on that reported conversation with Netanyahu, where Netanyahu delivered, I think, as far as Trump seems to have felt, a home run. And now the question is, how much can the regime be destabilized? How much can we take out of Fordo? For the Israelis themselves to get at those massive enrichment halls beneath an enormous mountain, they'd have to go in on the ground, possibly. We don't know what tricks the Mossad has up its sleeve, but it would be an enormous undertaking, which America could do from the skies after the Israelis have now cleared Iran's skies. They're some of the safest places for the Israeli Air Force to fly right now is the Iranian airspace. So I think Trump has shown incredible consistency. Everything he has said on this issue, I mean, without getting into American politics and all the other stuff, on this issue, I think Trump has shown incredible consistency over 10 years and incredible consistency over the last 6 months. Absolutely. And I think
So
he
now
thinks the Israelis delivered.
he did. I mean, he has to, only because he watches and he listens and he's briefed by people. I want to say for the audience's sake, I understand it is slightly absurd to use World War II analogies, but it's the language which is common to the world, at least that world which is historically literate. So I'm going to use 3 right now. It seems to me that Israel is coming to the end of its own battle of Britain, which was savage and terrible. I just got back from the United Kingdom. Savage and terrible, but they endured it, and then they went on to triumph, and that Israel's close to being done with its own battle of Britain when the rockets stop falling, especially the ballistic missiles. But that after the Battle of Britain, there were still, after a lull, there was the Battle of the Bulge, there were the V1s and the V2s, and everyone thought the homeland was safe and that the armies were marching, and then it turned out the Reich had some secret punches to deliver. Do you have that awareness front of mind, Haviv?
Oh, absolutely. Every single Israeli, every time an Israeli says, wow, we really knocked them down, they then follow up with the caveat. And of course, there must be, right? They must have capabilities. There's no way that they actually haven't built out any serious intelligence capacity in Israel, that they really are down to so few launchers that even though they have thousands of rockets that can hit us, or numbers range from 1,000 to a couple of thousand, I guess, that can hit us and dangerously so. They don't have enough launchers to make it any kind of massive assault at once, and a lot of the launchers get taken out very quickly by the Israeli Air Force and all of that. So we know we have done an extraordinary job. I use we because I'm just going to decide to partake in this immense success story. But those unbelievably competent Israelis in the IDF and in the Mossad have done this absolutely astonishing job that has rewritten the rules of warfare. I mean, there's a level of coordination between the Air Force and the Mossad. There's this fighting a war 2,000 kilometers away when you don't have planes that can fly 2,000 kilometers away. There's all of this unbelievable problems that have been overcome. Ballistic missiles jury-rigged to launch from a plane over Iraqi airspace so that they go up after leaving the plane and then basically glide down and add hundreds of kilometers of distance and do it accurately. That's a brand new Israeli invention just deployed, right, in the last few months that had never existed. So there are just so many innovations and so many new ways of doing all of this. The whole world is now in a debate. The U.S. Army, I happen to have read about the U.S. Army's own internal process, is having this debate, just like all other armies, about drones and missiles. And the Ukrainians showed us just a month ago what you could do in this new world of targeted drones. And it turned out that the Israelis not only had understood that already, one of the few armies in the world that really understood that, but had already gone to the very next phase, which is how do you integrate drones and missiles with a manned air force? In other words, a manned air force was not now obsolete. It was a new way of using all of these other platforms. And so there's just brand new breaking things happening in the skies over Iran with the Israelis. That level of competence really is astonishing. I can't tell you, the world is astonished, but the Israelis are astonished as well.
And I'm astonished, and the entire interview with Aviv Redigur is already posted at my YouTube channel, Hugh Hewitt, YouTube. Go like and subscribe it, please. President Trump installed the new flagpoles today, and when he did so, he made himself available to the press. He's the most available president ever. And he said this about the war with Iran that looms, cut number 2.
Some of the people in the base don't want a long-term war. They're afraid that we're going to get into a long-term war.
What you looking for a long-term war?
Yeah.
We're looking. I only want one thing:
Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon.
Right.
That's it. I'm not looking long-term, short-term. And I've been saying that for 20 years. I've been saying it as a civilian who got a lot of publicity. People would cover it. Very simply, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. That's it. It's not a question of anything else. And if you did, you wouldn't have much of a country because they would use it on us and they'd use it on other people and they'd be a terror all over the world.
Now, of course, when he was on my program in May, I asked him, how can you trust the Iranians? They've been trying to kill you for 5 years. He said, I would be foolish to answer that. But he sort of answered it today. Cut number 2. Number 3.
What gave you the idea to do this?
I've had it for a long time. In the first term I had it, but you guys were after me. I said I had to focus. I was the hunted, and now I'm the hunter. It's a big difference.
No, he's not talking about the press corps. I think he's talking about Iran. And then he said this, one more thing. What does he say to Khamenei? Cut number 4.
President, what do you say to the supreme leader of Iran who says that they will not surrender?
Say good luck.
And what is the end game?
Say it. It's already run out. That's why we're doing what we're doing.
Time has
We
run
had 60
out.
days.
That's why we're doing what we're doing. Look, he doesn't say yes, he doesn't. Masterful ambiguity. I applaud it. I hope the B-2s will fly soon. I have switched to consumer cellular for my second phone. I want you to think about it for both of your phones. I want you to consider calling them at 1-800-411-4454. When you call 1-800-411-4454, use the promo code HUGH25. That will get new customers a $5 credit on their first 5 monthly invoices. Now, why did I do that? I had to get a second phone. Could have easily gotten it from my old provider. Got it from Consumer Cellular because I don't want to sacrifice savings for service. I can have both service and savings, and I'm getting it with Consumer Cellular. So I want you to do one thing. Ask yourself, do you know how much you're paying for your cell phone? If you don't, you're a candidate for making this switch. You can keep your number, you can keep all your contacts, all your data. They can make that switch. They get you a new device. Everything can be done easily. If you're over 50 and you want unlimited data for some reason, you can get 2 lines for $60 a month, $30 each line. That's really cheap. And you might not need unlimited data if you're over 50. That's their target demo, 50 and older. They're not dealing with kids who are streaming a gazillion gigabytes of data. You need 5 gigs, you need 10 gigs, whatever it is, get it from consumercellular.com/Hugh or call 1-800-411-4454. The promo code is HUGH25, and new customers get a $5 credit off their first 5 monthly invoices. Visit consumercellular.com/Hugh. I am joined by Selena Zito, author of the soon-to-be best-selling book, Butler, which is about her first-person experience standing next to President Trump when he was shot in the aforementioned Butler. She and President Trump talk a lot. Selena, I want to begin by asking, have you ever talked with him about Iran?
I have not talked to him about Iran. Traditionally, our conversations focus on working class people, working people, and the coalition that formed to support him. It's a very Jacksonian coalition, but we've never talked about Iran at all.
All right, I want your guess. Do you think he's going to send the B-2s to bomb Fordo?
Oh gosh, I don't know how to guess that. However, here's what I do think. I think that as people watch this scenario play out and as the speculation grows, I think people should remember that President Trump has always said and has said for 10 years, he does not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon, period. End of story. He's also said, I don't want endless wars. So I think somewhere in there is what's going to happen. What I do think is really important that people understand is that no matter what's happening online, this coalition isn't going anywhere. And if people think that, whatever decision he makes in this moment, if they think this changes his coalition, then they do not understand Jacksonians because they're not going anywhere.
I want to tell you about something the president said when he was out front and they dedicated the flagpole today. Let's play clip number 13.
And I hope you enjoy it. And let's see how real people work. These are real people. You're not real people. Your job is too easy. Okay? That's one around the.
Okay, talking about the construction workers who are going to put up the flagpole. These are real people. And he turns to the journalist, you have easy jobs. He really knows that stuff, Selena.
He does. You know, the first interview I did with President Trump, it was in September of 2016. It was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was at the Marcellus Shale Coalition big convention, right? There's a whole bunch of suits there. They can't wait to see them. They can't wait to join him in the click line. But where I saw him shine, where I saw him have back and forth conversations, and where I saw him connect with people was when, after we were finished with the interview, he said, it takes me out of the green room, which was really just 4 blue curtains. And he takes me out of the green room and he says, come on, take a walk with me. And he just takes a walk. There's no cameras. I'm not recording. It was, you know, it wasn't a part of the interview. But, you know, I see the interaction he had with the people that are pushing the carts with the bottled water, the electricians, the construction people, the people that made that convention happen, not the people that paid $10,000.
We lost your audio,
go,
Selena.
right?
Okay.
Oh, I'm here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back. Let me play for you another cut of the president from the flagpole today, cut number 15.
I know you enjoy being president. Do you ever miss building things?
I love construction.
Yeah. It's in your heart, isn't it?
Well, I love it. I know it better than anybody. When I see a railroad going from San Francisco to L.A., I think it's 100 times over budget.
Incredible.
One of the most incompetent things. That's Newsom.
And why do they keep funding that?
I think we're not going to anymore. In fact, a little bit of a story, we're not going to fund that anymore. It's out of control. First of all, it doesn't go where it's supposed to. It's supposed to go from L.A. to San Francisco. Now, because they don't have any money, they've spent, 30, 40 times more than it was supposed to spend. And they made it much shorter because it no longer goes into the cities. It stops miles outside of the cities.
I love construction, and then he jumps on the train to nowhere that will never get done in the middle of the Central Valley, America's Stonehenge. Selena, he's on a roll.
He is on a roll. You know, about 10 days ago, I had the honor and privilege to ride on Air Force One. And I was riding actually back home to Pittsburgh for the U.S. Steel announcement with Nippon. And we get into the building, and he's looking out at everyone before he goes out onto the stage. And he says, come here, Selena. And he said, you look at these people. I love these people. These are my people. These are the people that make America work. They're the ones that do the things that aren't expecting praise, but that make our country function. They make our bridges better. They make our lives better. And he smiled, and I was like, this is why he went to places like Butler, why he went to places like East Palestine, because these are the people that he has connective tissue with. And a lot of that has to do with growing up on a construction site. People think of him as like rich, and he is, and the gold tower, and he has that. But he cut his teeth with the working men and women that made him be successful, that help uplift his success. And that is very, very hard to break for him, for him not to be deeply appreciative of those people.
What did you make of the Nippon deal? It happened while I was abroad. I'm glad it happened because I thought it was good for America's steel industry, but I was surprised by the rapidity with which it came together.
It was amazing. You know, this is a story I have covered from the very beginning. You and I have talked about this since 2017 when things started to fall apart with U.S. Steel. And it became evident that it was going to move out of Western Pennsylvania. And this is historic. You and I lived through what happened in Warren and Youngstown and up and down what they used to call the Steel Valley, right? This is a completely different ending to a story that I don't know that you and I or people of our age who grew up in Eastern Ohio or Western Pennsylvania ever thought would happen. And it doesn't just impact Western Pennsylvania. This impacts the entire chain of our economy, right? From our cars to our bridges to our appliances, everything we do and in this country is goes back to steel. So if American steel is prosperous, the country is prosperous.
And how many people were there waiting for him when he got off of Air Force One? I did not see this story covered very much abroad. I'm not surprised, but I just don't know the details.
Thousands. And I also had the honor and privilege of riding on in the Beast with him, where he tried to talk me into having a Diet Coke because I never had one before. That was pretty funny because I couldn't not make a face when I tasted it. He goes, "Oh, you don't like it, do you?" But there, not. I mean, it was pouring down rain. There was thunder and lightning. The wind was sideways, and yet the entire trip was lined with people waving to him. Let alone all the people that were inside the Urban Works steel plant in West Mifflin. It was one of the best days I've had as a reporter to see this come full circle in a positive way. Usually there's not a good story to tell about steel in America. But as churches, entire communities, families were split up because people had to, move and find jobs in other places. And I know you're not going to like this part, but there are 4,000 Steeler bars across the country, not because that's how many people moved away, but still wanted to have that connectivity to home.
No, I appreciate it. I just hope they don't have anything to celebrate there. Selena, I want to close by asking you about Air Force One. I have never been on any Air Force One except the one parked at the Reagan Air Museum. It's beautiful. How was this airport? He wants to get rid of this one. How'd you like it?
Well, I mean, I'm a kid from the wrong side of the tracks in the city of Pittsburgh. It was pretty amazing for me. The fact that I was there and not only got to ride in it and we had some very deep emotional conversations about Butler ahead of my book coming out, but also just had like great conversations about the steel industry. And it was an honor to be able to have that experience.
Selena, I'm looking forward to Butler. What day is publication day?
July 8th.
Go and pre-order it right now at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold online. Butler, you can't forget it. It's where someone tried to kill President Trump. Selena Zito was standing right there. And follow Selena at Zito Selena on X, and all of Selena's writings available at selenazito.com. President Trump has reconvened the National Security Council. We know what they're talking about. They're talking about whether or not to use American force in the aid of our ally Israel in airstrikes. Earlier today, David Axelrod pointed out that there had not been a formal debate on this in the Senate, and that he thought that was wrong. I pointed out that, in fact, in 2011, President Obama used airstrikes on Libya without any formal debate. It is within the president's constitutional authority to order airstrikes if he believes it's in the national interest. He does not need the permission of Congress. There is no requirement for a conversation with the Senate. There is no conversation that he brief the Gang of Eight, though I think he will. Joined now by Charles C.W. Cook, senior writer for National Review. Charles, the National Security Council has reconvened. What do you think they're going to decide? What do you want them to decide, or actually President Trump decide?
Well, I'm 50-50 on this, and I think that is deliberate on the part of Trump. I don't know what he's going to do. I don't think he wants anyone to know what he's going to do. And that is probably a big part of this story and has been for the last week. he made it seem a week ago as if he was indifferent toward Israel's hitting Iran in the first place. And now we learn that he is all in. So the strategic ambiguity is a part of this. What do I want him to do? Well, I have a caveat here, which I know you will disagree with, Hugh, and that is that I think Congress should authorize this. But what I want the United States to do, if it is necessary and if Israel can't do it on its own, is destroy the Fordow plants so that Iran cannot create a nuclear weapon. I think at this point, it would be a disaster to leave it half done. The facts on the ground are just different than they were a week ago. I was in favor of it then, but you can't half do this. So I think if we are necessary to getting that done, I don't know if we are, I don't know enough about the military aspect, then we should help.
I want to explore with you the constitutional issue, Charles, because unlike most lawyers, you're not a lawyer, but you actually know what you're talking about on the Constitution. I don't think this is even a remotely close call. He's the commander-in-chief. It's an air asset. This is not a declaration of war. He's not seeking it. And every precedent, whether it's Obama ordering airstrikes in Libya or going back to Clinton ordering airstrikes in the Balkans, back to FDR, the War Powers Act has never been tested, but it's not constitutional. Surely you don't think the War Powers Act is constitutional, do you?
No, although my objection to it is also on the congressional side, in that it implies and has been taken to mean by presidents that they can do what they want as long as they tell Congress. I mean, you're right in, of course, saying that Obama did this and that and Clinton did this and that. So did Harry Truman in Korea. But what Harry Truman did in Korea was a break with the norm. In the United States, in the early years with the Barbary Pirates, did have congressional authorization. Now, both Jefferson and Madison did not get a declaration of war. Madison wanted one, he didn't get it. But he did get an authorization for the use of force. Jefferson got 3 or 4. So I would like to see Congress add to the existing AUMFs Iran. If this country is a threat, which it is, then I think we should not be relying on the most flimsy connection, which would have to be, if you look at the documents, that because Iran helped harbor or aid those who carried out 9/11, they are tangentially covered under the AUMF. I just think it's really bad for our civic health. But this isn't an objection on the merits. And I agree with you that modern precedent, although I disagree with that precedent, is certainly on Trump's side. He wouldn't be doing anything the last few presidents haven't.
Okay, so we're in complete agreement. Let me ask you about your reaction to the Supreme Court decision today on the Tennessee bill prohibiting the use of puberty blockers and surgery on minors. The court ruled 6-3 that this is, surprise, a legislative matter and not one for the courts. I applaud them because there are no such things as trans rights in the Constitution. There's simply a legislature in Tennessee that gets to decide this. What do you think, Charles C.W. Cook?
Well, I think it was the right decision, and I was impressed by the majority opinion. I also thought Clarence Thomas did a good job in his concurrence, and Amy Coney Barrett proved to those who've been, in quite a silly manner, I think, insisting that she's the second coming of David Souter, that she is not. The key point here, and the press completely missed it as usual, is not whether, in the opinion of the justices of the Supreme Court, this law ought to exist. It's not even whether the claims that are made by trans people are correct or virtuous or sinful or whatever. It is whether or not the 14th Amendment, as understood at the time of its ratification, obviates Tennessee's laws in this area. And of course it doesn't. There's no equal protection claim against Tennessee setting elementary medical regulations. And this wasn't the case that was made by the ACLU, but there's no substantive due process claim either, which was the other avenue they should have gone down. This is such a straightforward case. It's preposterous to suggest that the federal constitution outlaws states governing the medical procedures that can be performed on children. Come now.
Come now, indeed. And I want to explain to people that we all have the same rights under the Equal Protection Clause. That's absolutely true. But we are not in a suspect class. We are not given any particular rights to a group of people who identify as transitioning from one gender to the other. The state of Tennessee can go the other way as well, Charles, and California can go the other way as well. It's up to the states to do this. So I don't think it's completely neutral. Expand. I haven't read Justice Barrett's opinion yet. I just got through the Chiefs. What did she say that impressed you?
Well, what Justice Barrett said, which was not spelled out to her satisfaction in the majority opinion, was that irrespective of the question of what degree of scrutiny should be applied and whether or not this was an equal protection case, the trans plaintiffs in the case are not in a protected class and cannot be in a protected class logically. So her argument was that even if there were some tangential equal protection argument here, it wouldn't apply to this area of the law.
I'm so glad to hear she did that. And I'm also glad to hear you mildly rebuke the people who thought Amy Coney Barrett was the second coming of David Souter. She's a very careful justice. She's very smart. I think, I just test this out on you quickly, the reason they did not uphold the Oklahoma charter school for Catholics is that she was recused. She's going to write the opinion overturning Employment Division versus Smith. She's the expert on that. And someone decided we can wait another term or two until another case is teed up. Do you think I'm out of my mind, or is that plausible?
I think you're completely right. And I think it for a couple of reasons. First off, she is extremely careful in her jurisprudence, as you say. She is a proceduralist, and sometimes that irritates people on the right, because even if she thinks that had we got to the merits, the case would have been solved 6-3, she will not get there. That is a matter of judgment. She is a judge. But second, I think she was clever here in making sure that when Employment Division versus Smith is overturned, and when the First Amendment revolution that we've seen in the last 10 or 15 years comes, she won't be accused of having done something untoward.
Unbelievably spot on. Charles C.W. Cook, follow him on Twitter at Charles C.W. Cook. Listen to his podcast, which is, of course, carrying his name, and listen to him on The Editors, the National Review podcast. Sarah C. Bedford is a political investigative reporter with the Washington Examiner. I just have a new column up over at the Washington Examiner on Iran. But Sarah Bedford, I want to ask you, what do you think's going to happen with President Trump and the Security Council as they meet at this hour?
You know, I think we've heard a lot of the White House telegraphing that the military has prepared options for President Donald Trump. I think we can expect that he's going to go over those options. But Trump is someone who likes to sort of maintain this air of unpredictability. That's a strategy for him. So you've heard him say throughout this day that nobody knows what I'm going to do. I'm not even sure he knows what he's going to do. But I think right now what's happening is the National Security Council, the military, they're preparing every sort of choice for him so that he can pull the trigger on one of them when he feels ready.
Do you expect that trigger to be pulled, if it's going to be pulled at all, tonight, Sarah?
That's really, really hard to say. You know, it's Donald Trump hasn't really telegraphed where his head is at on this. On the one hand, he's saying, you know, let me just hold off and see if Iran abandons its nuclear program. Would Iran do that overnight? What kind of timeline is he willing to give them before he exercises one of his military options? It's really not clear what he's going to do. I think that's a big part of his strategy here, is keeping that close to the vest.
All right, Sarah, let me switch over to the Congress and the one big beautiful bill. Dave McCormick opened the show saying, I'm the new kid around here. I'm not really in the negotiating room. What do you think is going to happen in the Senate with the Crapo version that came out of Finance?
I think this is tricky, right? Because there were some really hard-fought provisions in the House version that were necessities for it to pass. One of them was the SALT deduction, and the way cuts to Medicaid were structured were very delicately negotiated. And the Senate took a look at that and said, you know what? We're going to do our own thing here on some of these really important issues. Johnson is working with a smaller margin here, and the House version of this bill was more populist, more MAGA. What we saw come out of the Senate is more business friendly, supply side, kind of traditional Republican bill. And those two approaches are not easily reconciled. And so at some point, I do think President Trump himself may have to step in here and sort of take a heavier hand in the negotiations.
You know, I had Senator Daines on yesterday, and he said, you know, our version says SALT stays at 10,000. But maybe what we ought to do is just keep it at 40,000, but limit who gets to use that by income. I thought he was telegraphing the compromise. There's a compromise in there, isn't there?
There has to be, right? Because the $10,000 deduction is just not going to fly in the House. So there has to be some sort of compromise there. But I think, the White House doesn't want this to go into a formal conference between the House and the Senate. They want to work out deals, not have this bill ping-ponging back and forth between the chambers, and get it over the finish line before the August recess, which is, the hard and fast, arbitrary but hard and fast deadline that the White House is setting. And so, that a lot of these deals, I think you are going to see worked out behind closed doors, the SALT deduction being a huge one that gets negotiated. And then the green energy tax credits is also a big sticking point.
Well, now, I'm told July 4 is the deadline. Is that just a fake deadline?
So that's the deadline that the White House has publicly asked for. But when Vice President J.D. Vance went to Capitol Hill this week behind closed doors, he was telling senators, July 4th is what the president really wants, and please do this. But the real serious drop dead date is the August recess. They cannot drag on longer than that. So that would be when I think the real hammer would come down, because the July 4th recess, that's coming up very, very soon. That's a real time crunch on the Senate.
Now the debt limit is also rolled into this bill. When does the debt limit actually impact the Treasury Department?
So I think that is when there was a sort of a broad window I believe CBO was predicting for that, but our Treasury was predicting for that, but we're looking at the end of summer, July, August. So I think some of why the deadline is being placed at the end of summer for the real drop dead date is that they also have to contend with the debt ceiling after you get through July.
Sarah C. Bedford, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining me. Follow her on X at Sarah C. Bedford. Follow me as well over to HughHewitt.com, and please be generous to our friends at Angel Tree. Give a listen to this.
All these children that have attended today are children who have been affected by crime and incarceration to some degree. Mom or dad currently incarcerated, and we serve them through our Angel Tree program.
Skylar Shannon is with Prison Fellowship's Angel Tree program.
Our hope is that they hear a story of redemption, one of hope, one that tells them that, just because you're born in a certain situation, you don't have to stay in that situation, and that our life choices affect when and where we're going.
Angel Tree can send another child to camp for $200. If you can't afford that, $100 helps. You can go to the banner at the top of HughHewitt.com, or you can call 800-206-2764. 800-206-2764. Please be generous and change a child's life. Angel Tree thanks you. So do I. Once a month, Philip Balboni, the founder and chief editor of GlobalPost.com, joins me. Philip, thank you for being here today, because today's Global Post, the lead story, is not about Israel and Iran, as I thought it might be. It's about Russia and Ukraine. And I'm very glad it is, because I did not know that there had been a massive prisoner exchange, nor had I read about the negotiations in Turkey, because everything's been Israel and Iran, and I've been abroad. Fill people in about what's going on in these negotiations, the prisoner swap, and why you are very pessimistic negotiations.
Yeah. Well, good to see you, Hugh, first of all. I hope you're enjoying your new time period. So I think to start, it's important to remember that the war has cost 1 million Russian killed and wounded, and about 400,000 Ukrainians. Just a staggering number when you think about it in perspective about our own experience here in the United States. That's more people than we have lost in all the wars, all the conflicts since World War II. It's just amazing. I mean, it's estimated that 8 out of every 10 Russian recruits that President Putin is finding across Russia are dying on the battlefield. That's another staggering figure. One of the bright spots here has been the prisoner exchange. So 1,200 Russians and Ukrainians were repatriated just recently, and I'm sure bringing joy to their families. But that is about the only thing we can really say on the good news front. Yes, there have been talks in Istanbul. Unfortunately, they didn't really go very far. President Trump is was trying to put pressure on Putin and on Zelensky to come together and negotiate some sort of a truce and maybe even a settlement to the war. But the issues, they're so far apart that it's going to be extremely difficult. Any day now, the Russians are expected to start their summer offensive. And
I want to read from the Global Post. What had no idea this was going to happen, Phil. Russia plans to have 1.5 million active troops, up from 1.3 million in September. Eventually, it could boost forces and kit on the Western Front. That's the only front by 30 to 50%. That they're doing the World War I thing. The whatever that last offensive was in 1918.
Exactly. It's a huge army, by far the biggest in Europe. It just dwarfs every European country, and one of the biggest militaries in the world. Not to forget that they also have nuclear weapons. So it's a huge force, and they're recruiting something like 10 to 15,000 new soldiers every month to join the fight. So it really looks like Putin is determined to win, or at least to accomplish more of his goals. And I think the primary goal was to get all of eastern Ukraine. That would be the area that's called the Donbass. And that's where the front lines are. They stretch for 600 miles from the north of the country all the way down to the south and to the sea. Down there where Crimea is. And despite 3 years now, more than 3 years of fighting, there's been no major Russian advance since the early days of the war, going back to February of 2022. They've made small advances all along these front lines. They pushed in certain places, but this is happening every day. With all the things happening in the world, like Israel, Iran, Gaza, it's possible to forget that things like the Ukraine war are going on. But I hope your listeners will not do that. This is an extraordinary event playing out in the heart of Europe, and there is no real end in sight. I wish
there was a strategic blow dealt by Ukraine against Russia by the use of drones that prefigured what Iran did. But in today's report in the globalpost.com, you don't think that changed Putin's attitude towards negotiation?
I think it just made him angry. And just on Tuesday, the biggest attack on Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital, happened. 28 people were killed. A Russian missile hit a 9-story apartment building, which then completely collapsed. So it made him mad. It was an incredible event for the Ukrainians. They basically smuggled drones inside of Russia on trucks, probably driven by Russians, positioned themselves in various places, including in Siberia. And then they launched these drones and they destroyed, their most important strategic bombers, many of them, not the entire fleet. But these planes are not replaceable because they're not being built anymore, and apparently they can't be built anymore. So it was a tremendous blow to Russia. So it shows Ukraine.
Well, we're almost out of time. I just got to say, I hope our B-2 commanders are aware of this. And the same thing happened to the Iranian bases by Israel driving trucks in. In 2005, those trucks went in. Philip Balboni, I want to remind everyone, globalpost.com is where you go to subscribe to the best daily newsletter on international affairs. And it is absolutely free for teachers and their students. Now, I know school's out for most people, but teachers might want to start subscribing right now. And by the way, is that college kids as well, Philip?
College kids, high school students, anywhere in the United States and internationally. We have almost 14,000 students and teachers now, Hugh, and 109 countries around the world. I've said it on the program before. It's one of the most wonderful things we do. I would encourage every teacher who's listening to you, go to our website, sign up, provide it to your students. It's entirely free.
Every day. It's 109 countries, but it ought to be a lot more Americans learning about the world every day at globalpost.com. The toolbar will take you to teachers. It's absolutely free for you and your students. Take advantage of globalpost.com. President Trump is meeting with the National Security Council as we speak. The question on the table, whether or not to use American air power to assist Israel in its air campaign against the Iranian nuclear and ballistic missile programs. Later in the day, it was announced that Israel has begun to strike the secret police headquarters and the security apparatus that has been used for decades to repress the Persian people whenever they've attempted to rise up against this theocracy that is so fanatical. They've murdered, they have imprisoned, they have tortured, and they have been at war with us for 46 years. As I will write in Fox News tomorrow morning, this is the most important decision of Donald Trump's life. I hope he makes the right one and dispatches our air resources to end the nuclear program and remove an existential threat, not just to Israel, but I believe if they have nuclear weapons or the capacity to send dirty bombs abroad, they will send them here. I really do believe that. I also really do believe in Relief Factor. Why? Because I take it every day, and as I told you, I'm in a new studio. New studio is great. Hopefully you like the picture. But if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you're listening on the Salem Radio Network, or you're at Port St. Lucie on AM 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast, I haven't got the chair right. And therefore, I went to Staples today and ordered a new chair with a better, higher back support. And it's really, by the end of 3 hours, the upper back is just tight. You know, you got to lean back in a show like this. And I can't do it in this chair. It's a higher chair, in order to give you a better picture. And that's because we aim to please you. We aim the Salem News Channel to be your channel of choice for news. And it ought to be, because we bring you the news as it happens without fear or favor of anyone's opinion about what our opinions are. And every one of our hosts does that. Even Gallagher. I think Gallagher may have read a newspaper while I was gone. I'm not sure. But he played a trick while I was gone. He made a contribution to Angel Tree on my name. That was very funny, Mike. I noticed that. I'll find a way to get back. But I believe in Relief Factor, and the good news is by tomorrow, this tight back will be over because Relief Factor works, and I take it every day in the first hour of the show, and you watch it on the Salem News Channel. And I've been doing that for 10, 12 years now, and Relief Factor works. Call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief if you want to get a 3-week starter pack for $19.95. That's a special offer. They lose money every time they fill that offer, but they want you to try it. 3 packs a day for the first week, 2 for the second week, 1 for the third, and then 1 per day thereafter. Get the levels of Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega up in your body and feel better every day, minus the minor aches and pains that nag. Whether you're a trundler or a runner or a swimmer or a biker or someone who just likes a good long walk in the rain, Relief Factor will help you. So head over to their website, relieffactor.com, find that starter pack, order it, try it. You will thank me. Relieffactor.com. Say a prayer for the president. Say a prayer for the beleaguered families of Israel hiding every 30 minutes or so in a shelter because the sirens go off. And pray for the people of Iran that they be free